Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, in the run-up to last September's independence referendum, the SNP told voters that the economic numbers were stacked in Scotland's favour, that an independent Scotland would be quids in. The SNP based their analysis on the huge revenues it predicted would continue to flow from North Sea oil. Only trouble, the calculations were based on an oil price of over $100 a barrel. Today, a barrel of oil is less than half of that, just $48. And getting oil out of the North Sea is more expensive than ever. And it's not just the SNP's figures that have been dented by the slump in the price of oil. Here's our Adam again.
The support ships are going more slowly to save fuel. Is that an executive with spare time to work on his swing? The industry body reckons the falling price of oil has cost 65,000 jobs across the country. But the UK's capital of crude has been hit especially hard.
The traffic is less. You'll speak to the taxi drivers, their business is down by 40%. The hotel occupancy is down, the airport is down. So it is having an impact across the North East and in Aberdeen.
The North Sea produces about 1.5 million barrels a day, compared to more than 4.5 million a day at its peak. And it's generated billions of pounds for the UK. One of those billions belongs to the retired oil baron Sir Ian Wood.
I'm a lucky generation in Aberdeen. And my nightmare is that 2050, 2060, probably 2 generations down the road, and I won't be here, we'll look back and say, well, they took it all for themselves and they had a great opportunity and look what they've done with it. But look at the legacy they've left us. I mean, I think we have a responsibility to leave a legacy that people will want to carry on living in Aberdeen. There'll be employment in Aberdeen, and I can get very emotional about that.
And there's a political cost to all of this too, because the SNP's vision for an independent Scotland is based on oil costing more than $100 a barrel. And with the party holding their conference in this city this week, the issue's probably going to come up.
And we've been joined now from Aberdeen by the SNP's Deputy Leader, Stewart Hosie. Welcome back to the Daily Politics, Mr Hosie.
Thanks, Andrew.
If you'd won the referendum, you'd now be 5 months away from your self-chosen Independence Day. You chose it for March of 2016. You had told us in the referendum and on the Scottish White Paper that oil revenues would be £8 billion in 2016-17. The latest forecast has them at 500 million. So from over 8 billion to 500 million. How would you be filling that £8 billion gap?
We didn't win the referendum, Andrew.
No, that bit I know. But if you had, how would you be filling the gap?
We didn't win the referendum, Andrew. The gap that requires to be filled at the moment is at a UK level because every penny of oil and gas revenue ever has gone and still goes to the UK exchequer. I think more important than the hypothetical of what if we'd won is where are we now? You said $48 a barrel. The 52-week low is $40. The 52-week high is $92. The OBR are suggesting around $70 into the future. And both Sir Ian Wood and Jim McCall are suggesting a bounce back and a hardening of the price in the kind of 15 to 18 month time frame. It's also the case, and we heard in the package about the impact in Aberdeen, that the oil industry have taken measures to manage their own costs. So we need to support those. We need to continue to look at the tax regime about exploration allowances, doing everything we can to support an industry which has had a very difficult time with the softening of the price, but look to it having a very healthy long-term future. Far more important, I think, for real people's jobs than the hypotheticals of what if would something different had happened last September.
Well, except that that's what you campaigned on, the future of our nation. And what I am trying to work out is whether you were campaigning on a false prospectus. Because you would have had if you had won the referendum, you would be facing an £8 billion gap. And you could only have filled it by either cutting spending by 14% or raising taxes by 16% or a combination of the two. what would you have done?
Andrew, every time I'm on this programme, you seem to want to fight last year's referendum. The no side won. What we need to do is to support the industry now, welcoming the reversal of the daft decision on the supplementary charge increase, looking at additional field allowances, trying to push for more exploration allowances, doing what the Scottish Government are doing in terms of apprenticeships to ensure the labour chain is maintained into the future and we don't suffer from labour shortages when the sector bounces back. I don't know why you want to fight last year's referendum all over again, Andrew.
I don't want to find it.
I'm trying, industry.
I'm trying, Mr. Hosie, to unpick what you told the Scottish people. And you told the Scottish people that there would be 8 billion from oil revenues. Indeed, you said there'd be 9 billion by your second year of independence. And I'm trying to work out what you would have done if you had won, or whether you actually campaigned on a false prospectus.
No, Andrew, the oil forecasts we use, as you well know, were actually lower than those used by the UK government.
No, they weren't, Mr. Hosie. I'm sorry, Mr. Hosie, that is not true. The OBR forecast
at the same time.
The OBR I've got it here. The OBR forecast at the time of the Scottish Government white paper saying there'd be 8 billion in revenues was 4 billion. It was half your forecast.
I think if you look at the business department, you'll find their oil price forecast was higher than the Scottish Government's. I said the UK government, not the OBR.
The government depends on OBR forecasts, Mr. Hosie.
I think you look at the UK government's figures, they were higher than the Scottish government's. The Scottish government figure was more conservative. But if you want to admit, or if you want me to admit, the Scottish government, the Yes campaign, the UK government, the OBR got the figures wrong, you're absolutely right. But
you just got them more wrong than anybody else.
No, we didn't, and I've already explained that, and that is the wrong thing to say. But how much better it would have been if we'd been able to take action to overturn the daft decision on the supplementary charge without having to wait months and months and months for the UK government to take a decision that everybody knew needed to be taken in the first place.
Let me come on to your government's own record in Scotland. Why have you barely increased health spending in Scotland since 2008?
Health spending, revenue side, has increased in real terms every year. It's about to hit 12 billion for the first time, and if we're re-elected, it will rise in real terms every year.
How much has it increased in real terms? How much has it increed in real terms every year, Mr. Hosie?
Well, I don't have that figure, but
okay,
the revenue budget
is
a real terms increase.
Well, you've just claimed it, and I'll tell you. Health in 2008, just the year after you came to power in Scotland, was 11.7 billion in Scotland. By last year, it was 12.1 billion. This is in real terms. That's an increase of only £300 million in real terms. It's peanuts and much less than the increase in England.
Well, I have to say, given we have had a government subject to quite extraordinary cuts in revenue and capital from London, the fact we've been able to protect the NHS and deliver a real terms increase every year and a future real terms increase planned is a remarkable achievement given the pressure, the downward pressure by George Osborne on the Scottish budget. That's something we should be proud that we've managed to achieve, not something that should be dismissed in a line.
Why should you be proud, Mr. Hosie? The English health budget over the past 5 years has risen in cash terms by 12%. You've only increased your health budget by 8%. Why are you lagging behind England?
I think we're not lagging behind England. We have a different health service. We've fully maintained it. We've stopped the privatisation of it. We're not going ahead with the daft junior doctors' contracts. We've taken the private sector out of cleaning our hospitals and reduced hospital-acquired infection by around 80%. We're seeing more patients than ever before. We've an increase to 137,000 employees in the NHS. This is a very strong record. Well, and better, I think, Andrew, to recognise the achievements than simply talk the NHS down.
Except that in terms of increased spending, health spending in Scotland is increasing less than it is in England. As a share of government spending in Scotland, health spending has been falling. It's been rising in England. And one of the consequences is that in terms of waiting time targets, you haven't hit them in the A&E since September 2009. You have missed for 6 years in a row.
I think you'll find that when the targets were met, the target was actually increased and strengthened.
You haven't met it since 2009.
That's because we set an increased target, Andrew.
But you
a
failed
more
to
tough
meet.
target. A better target.
What?
Yes, but the thing about these targets is you aim to get to them. You put the investment in, you increase the number of GPs and nurses and doctors and consultants, staff across the piece to constantly try to improve, and challenging targets are set to do just that.
Let me just take the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow, huge hospital in Scotland's biggest city. Its records show that it's now meeting waiting times for only 77% of patients, whereas the target's 98. It hasn't got the money, it is failing, and it hasn't got the money because you've not spent the money on health in Scotland.
Well, I dispute that, and I think it's completely
you dispute
wrong,
the Queen
Andrew,
Elizabeth figures?
It's completely wrong, Andrew, to choose a single hospital and pretend that that is instructive of the entire NHS.
Not if you're in that hospital
Across
on a
the
Friday night,
NHS.
it's not.
Well, to pick one hospital and one busy Friday is an even more facile argument than looking at the
you've missed the
NHS across the
average.
piece.
You haven't hit the
I'm not
target,
sure
Mr.
why you're
Hosie,
doing this,
since
Andrew.
2009. That's my point. I only picked one hospital to give you an example. Take every hospital, you haven't hit the target.
Well, that simply isn't the case. It's
Well, it
simply not the case to say not a single hospital has hit the
No,
target.
I said take
That
the
is
average of
simply
all the hospitals,
untrue.
you haven't hit the target.
Andrew, we set more difficult targets to drive up quality.
All right.
It was the right thing to do.
Can I just, I don't quite understand this, because in terms of as a share of public spending, health spending in England has risen in the past 5 years from 19% of total spending to 20%. Now that increase, it's a 12% rise in cash. That's reflected in the Barnett formula that gets sent to you. You get a share of that increase, and yet you have chosen not to spend that increase in health.
Well,
you've cut the share of spending on health.
Again,
why did you do that?
Again, Andrew, you're pretending there's been increases. The Scottish budget has been cut across the entirety of the last Parliament, and we're facing something in the order of 5.2% real terms cuts over this Parliament.
But Mr. Hosie,
to choose a change in revenue in one department and pretend there's been an increase in the amount of money the Scottish Government has to spend simply isn't correct.
What could be more important than health, which is entirely under your control? And in terms of the share of health spending as a percentage of total public spending in Scotland, whereas it's risen in England, it's fallen from 18.3% in Scotland to 17.3%. You have been cutting health as a share of public spending. And I ask again, why would you do that?
It is extraordinary. While there has been a real terms increase in health spending and resource spending across the Parliament, which you've conceded, you're now trying to suggest a real terms increase in health spending in Scotland is a cut. It's the wrong argument, Andrew. I don't know why you're doing this. I don't know why you're pretending the NHS is in crisis when it is not. You need to accept, as you have, there's been a real terms increase in NHS revenue spending, and that was the right thing to do.
You're proud of a real terms rise of a paltry £300 million over 6 years. Works out at 50 million quid a year in a budget of 11.7 billion.
I think when we take the budget, we increase it each year, we end up spending 12 billion for the first time on the NHS in Scotland, when people are incredibly satisfied with the service they get.
Really?
To have it talked down in such an abstract way is a bizarre approach to be taking.
Okay, it wasn't abstract, Mr. Hosie. It was using the figures of your own Scottish government. These are the official figures. But we better leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Enjoy your time in Aberdeen. I rather envy not being in Aberdeen too. It's a great city. Thank you. Let's go back to Aberdeen, where our Adam is trying out a new concept for the daily politics. Good luck with it, Adam. It's called the Mood Box Live.
Thanks, Andrew. Yes, we're staging an unprecedented live event. We're going to do the mood box in real time. We actually started a little while ago asking people the question, should the next independence referendum be sooner or later? But we're going to carry on the balls live. Jim, you've been waiting patiently. What's your answer to the question, sooner or later?
It depends where your parameters are between sooner or later. I would suggest that later, if that includes up... in fact, I think from 2020 onwards is about the time to have the referendum.
I'd say that counts as later. Go ahead, pop your ball in the box. Later, that one there. Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. Oh, you're a big SNP badge fan, obviously.
I am.
What do you reckon, sooner or later?
Well, the Scottish people will decide that. I can't decide that. So only the Scottish people could. What I would like is for at least 2020 to be an independent country. But the people of Scotland will decide on
Are
that.
you going to put your ball back in the bag then, or in the middle? Oh, I wonder how long it'll stay there. Hello, sir. Right. Your daughter loves the mood box so much she wants to eat the ball.
Absolutely, she's been licking it and eating it all day. So
when should the next referendum be?
I think it has to be later because we have to show the people of Scotland that there's an alternative to Tory austerity max.
Okay, grab a ball, pop it in the later box then.
there,
Maybe not the one that's been licked and eaten. Oh look, there's Lynn, who we spoke to earlier on in the programme. What are we going to do? Should the referendum be now or later?
Later, definitely later. Give it time. We have to convince more people, and once it's done, then it's done forever.
Okay, I'll let these guys put some balls in the box, and while they do that, earlier on today I spoke to an SNP celebrity. Here's what she had to say when I tried to coax her into doing the mood box. First Minister, do you want to come and do the daily politics mood box?
Let me think about that.
You grab a... Oh, this is
I'm in a rush.
This is democracy in
Sooner
action.
rather than later. What does that mean?
The next referendum.
When the time is right. There you go. You should have a box for the time when the time is right, when the people want it.
I knew you were going to say that.
See, I'm nothing if not predictable in these things.
Thank you, anyway. Oh, good old Nicola Sturgeon, she didn't grab one of my balls. Right, guys, sooner or later, when do you want the referendum?
Preferably later, because if we have it too soon, then you're not really respecting the will of the Scottish people right now, so later for me.
Go ahead. Does anyone want to have the referendum really soon? You do. When would you like to have it?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yeah.
On a Saturday?
Any day, yesterday or tomorrow. I'm not clear, and I want it sooner.
But are you convinced? But don't you think you just get the same result, a no vote again?
No, you have to do it to find out, do you? And who says that we can't have one next year, the year after, the year after? It's the Scottish people that decide.
Okay, go ahead then. Get it in the sooner box. Guys, what do you think? What do you think?
I think in the middle, because we've got the EU referendum coming up, and I think if Scotland votes to stay in the EU, but England decides to leave, I could see Scotland leaving the EU, the UK.
What about an issue like bombing Syria? Because Stewart Hosie mentioned that earlier in the week, that oh no, it was Angus Robertson actually, wasn't it, saying that maybe bombing Syria would be a trigger for a referendum.
Yeah, you've got to look at that of, do we really need to be involved in the Syrian war? Yeah. They're very far away from us. Look at that.
Right, everyone grab a ball. We've run out of time, so you grab a ball, get it in the box. As you can see, it's still pretty 50-50, but I'll keep going for another couple of hours and text you the result later on, Andrew.
I can hardly wait, Adam. It'll probably keep me awake at night. There must be a fear, small fear, no bigger than a distant cloud, that for the SNP this is as good as it gets. Because that's the nature of politics in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a distant fear if you're polling 50% in the polls, 30 points ahead of Labour. I generally don't think it does get better than that. And, most people in the SNP are pretty realistic, and the people at the top of the SNP are people probably at the top of the SNP 15, 20 years ago, and they understand that very much.
On the other hand, it's not quite clear who's going to, quotes, cut them down to size, because the Conservatives in Scotland, although they have quite a widely admired feisty leader in Ruth Davidson, they're polling, and in the elections, the same percentage they got in the disastrous year of 1997. And we began this programme by saying we don't see any quick way back for Labour in Scotland either.
No, I mean, the SNP is in the same position as the Tories are in London, which is that the Tories can sit here basically saying it's an empty football field. Everyone else is either retired or got a broken leg or is in a huddle in the corner talking to themselves and not looking our way. And the only thing the SNP and the Tories have got to worry about is not tripping over their own shoelaces. At the moment, I think they can afford to be rather smug.
OK.
I've been getting